Margaret Roberts opens the podcast by recounting the Oklahoma City bombing as the deadliest domestic terror attack in American history. On a seemingly ordinary April morning in 1995, a massive explosion devastated the Alfred Piera Federal Building, killing 168 people. The investigation quickly shifted focus to Timothy McVeigh, a white supremacist and Gulf War veteran, who was identified as the primary perpetrator. The bombing was understood as an act of revenge against the federal government, particularly in response to the Waco siege and Ruby Ridge incidents, which had inflamed anti-government sentiments among certain extremist groups. Roberts highlights the remarkable speed and efficiency of the FBI's investigation following the bombing. Within days, agents traced the vehicle used in the attack, a Ryder rental truck loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer and diesel fuel, back to McVeigh. The key breakthrough came from tracking the truck's axle identification number, which led investigators to a rental agency in Junction City, Kansas, where McVeigh had rented the truck under his own name. This forensic detail was pivotal in unraveling the case. McVeigh's arrest in Perry, Oklahoma, was almost incidental. He was pulled over for a traffic violation, driving a car without a license plate and carrying a concealed weapon. Despite his polite demeanor, the arresting officer had no inkling of McVeigh's connection to the bombing at the time. The FBI's swift identification and capture of McVeigh became a defining moment in the case, culminating in his infamous perp walk in an orange jumpsuit, where he was met with chants of "baby killer" from the gathered crowd. One of the most enduring enigmas of the Oklahoma City bombing is the identity and existence of Doe Number Two, a second man reportedly seen with McVeigh at the time of the truck rental. Roberts explains that multiple eyewitnesses, 24 ordinary citizens, testified to seeing McVeigh accompanied by a muscular man with a tattoo, dark hair, and a distinctive presence. The rental agency staff also recalled a second man standing to the side during the truck rental, fueling suspicions of a co-conspirator. Despite this, the FBI eventually retracted its initial claims about Doe Number Two, suggesting that the eyewitnesses had mistaken an innocent soldier who happened to be at the rental location around the same time. This soldier was identified and cleared, and the FBI declared that McVeigh acted alone. Roberts underscores the implausibility of this explanation, noting that the FBI never produced the surveillance videotape they claimed to have, which allegedly showed the two men delivering the bomb. The disappearance of this critical evidence remains a glaring omission in the official narrative. Roberts delves into the troubling absence of key evidence, particularly the videotape of the bombing's delivery, which was admitted to exist by an FBI agent during preliminary hearings but has never been publicly released. This suppression raises serious questions about the transparency and integrity of the investigation. The failure to produce such a vital piece of evidence in a high-profile terrorism case is unprecedented and fuels speculation about a cover-up. The podcast guest also discusses the broader pattern of the government's reluctance to disclose information, including the sudden dismissal of Doe Number Two's existence and the lack of financial transparency regarding how McVeigh and his alleged accomplices funded the operation. Roberts points out that neither McVeigh nor Terry Nichols, his known associate, had the financial means to carry out such a complex and costly attack, yet the government never thoroughly investigated or explained the source of the funding. Margaret Roberts provides a nuanced portrait of Timothy McVeigh, painting him as a disillusioned and aimless veteran who struggled to find his place after returning from the Gulf War. McVeigh's failed attempt to join the Special Forces due to physical injuries marked a turning point in his life, leading him to drift through menial security jobs and live with his father. His growing political radicalization, fueled by anti-government literature such as the Turner Diaries, and his participation in gun shows across the country, positioned him within a network of white supremacists and militia groups. Roberts emphasizes that McVeigh's motivations were deeply tied to his anger over federal actions at Waco and Ruby Ridge, which he viewed as government overreach and tyranny. His transformation from a soldier to a domestic terrorist was gradual and complex, involving associations with fringe groups and a lifestyle that was both itinerant and secretive. The podcast suggests that McVeigh's story is emblematic of a broader phenomenon of radicalization among disaffected veterans and right-wing extremists in the 1990s. Terry Nichols, McVeigh's Army buddy and alleged accomplice, is another figure shrouded in mystery. Roberts explains that Nichols was older and had a troubled post-military life, including multiple trips to the Philippines, the purpose and funding of which remain unexplained. Nichols' connections to known terrorist figures in the Philippines, such as Ramzi Youssef, who was involved in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, add a perplexing international dimension to the case. Despite Nichols' conviction and life sentence, many questions about his role and the logistics of the bombing remain unanswered. Roberts points out that Nichols' financial situation was precarious, and the government never accounted for how he and McVeigh financed the bomb, the truck rental, or their extensive travels. Nichols has consistently denied any connection between his travels and the bombing, but the lack of clarity fuels ongoing speculation about deeper, possibly international links. One of the most chilling revelations in the podcast is the story of Kenneth Trentadue, a construction worker and former convict who was arrested on a parole violation shortly after the bombing. Roberts recounts how Trentadue, a dead ringer for Doe Number Two, was mysteriously transferred from California to Oklahoma City and found dead in his cell under suspicious circumstances. Officially ruled a suicide, his body bore signs of brutal torture, including stun gun-like injuries and a slashed throat, which were concealed by heavy makeup during his funeral. Roberts details how Trentadue's brother, Jesse, a lawyer, launched a relentless campaign to uncover the truth behind his brother's death, suspecting foul play and a government cover-up. The case exposed a pattern of suspicious deaths among prisoners connected to the bombing investigation, including other inmates who were potential witnesses. The Trentadue case remains a stark example of the lengths to which authorities may have gone to suppress inconvenient truths. Roberts introduces the Aryan Republican Army, ARA, a neo-Nazi bank robbery gang linked to McVeigh and Nichols, as a critical but underreported element of the bombing's backstory. The ARA was responsible for a series of bank robberies in the Midwest, raising significant funds for white supremacist causes. Members of this group are believed to have been involved in the bombing, with some possibly serving as Doe Number Two. The podcast suggests that the FBI was aware of the ARA and its activities, but chose to downplay or obscure these connections during the official investigation. The deaths of key figures associated with the ARA, including Richard Guthrie, who died under suspicious circumstances shortly before testifying, further complicate the narrative. Roberts argues that the government's failure to fully investigate or disclose the ARA's role points to a deliberate effort to control the story and avoid exposing broader networks of domestic terrorism. A significant portion of the discussion centers on the FBI's infiltration of right-wing extremist groups through covert operations such as PACCON, Patriot Conspiracy. Roberts reveals that Timothy McVeigh was under surveillance by the FBI and that informants were embedded within the networks that planned the bombing. One such informant, Carol Howe, was embedded in Elohim City, a known white supremacist enclave, and reported on plans to bomb federal buildings, including the Oklahoma City Federal Building. Despite this intelligence, the bombing was not prevented, raising questions about the government's motives and effectiveness. Roberts and her sources suggest that the FBI's surveillance programs may have been more about monitoring and controlling extremist groups than stopping violent acts. The suppression of whistleblower testimony and the refusal to release critical evidence, such as surveillance tapes, indicate a pattern of obfuscation and possible complicity. Roberts is critical of the mainstream media's role in shaping and limiting the public's understanding of the Oklahoma City bombing. She recounts how major news outlets, including ABC and Newsweek, were pressured by the Department of Justice to kill investigative stories that exposed government informants and surveillance failures. These editorial decisions effectively buried crucial information and prevented a fuller reckoning with the bombing's complexities. The podcast highlights the broader issue of media self-censorship and the reluctance to challenge official narratives, especially when national security and law enforcement agencies exert pressure. Roberts laments that the victims and the public have been denied the truth for decades, allowing the government to avoid accountability and maintain a sanitized version of events that serves political and institutional interests. The Oklahoma City bombing had profound political consequences, particularly for the Clinton administration. Roberts notes that the tragedy bolstered President Bill Clinton's standing, allowing him to position himself as a compassionate leader and to push through legislation expanding law enforcement powers and anti-terrorism measures. The bombing became a rallying point for increased federal funding and authority, much like the post-9/11 era. However, Roberts warns that this legacy is double-edged. The government's failure to fully disclose the truth and its apparent manipulation of the narrative have contributed to a deep mistrust among many Americans, especially those sympathetic to the anti-government movements targeted by the investigation. The bombing and its aftermath exemplify how crises can be exploited to expand state power while suppressing inconvenient truths. In closing, Roberts emphasizes the urgent need for transparency and accountability regarding the Oklahoma City bombing. She advocates for the immediate release of all withheld evidence, including the videotapes of the bombing and whistleblower depositions related to FBI surveillance programs. Roberts underscores that only through full disclosure can the victims' families and the public understand what truly happened and prevent similar abuses in the future. She also highlights ongoing efforts by individuals like Kenneth Trentadue, who continue to fight for justice despite institutional resistance. Roberts expresses cautious hope that reform-minded officials within the Department of Justice and FBI might one day facilitate a more honest reckoning.